All right, and we're back. I don't know. We got to start keeping track of how long we spend on these breaks, but we're trying to keep them as quick as possible. Regardless, I'm biding for time. We want to spend that more effectively talking about the exciting thing of this session, which is going to be Amazon Honeycode. Before we get into any of the details, joining us is Gavin G, head of product management over at Amazon Honeycode. Gavin, thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. It's exciting to be here and share what we've got today.
Gavin, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show and talk to you. Now, we spoke briefly about this before, but before we dive in, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about the product.
Yeah, certainly. We've got a lot to cover, so I don't want to take too much time take away from actually showing the folks, but I thought I'd share a little bit about kind of who I am, what the product is. So as you said, Gavin G, I've been on the team now for a couple of years, and we've been building this product called Honeycode. I will promise today to try and avoid using the code names because it's getting used to using the public name these days. So it may slip, but we're excited to build this new service that is really targeting business users. And we launched it this week, and it's had really quite a great set of feedback from customers so far.
Awesome.
So with that, why don't we jump in, right?
Yeah, let's get into it.
All right.
Again, while Gavin's getting that set up, if anyone has any questions at any point during the broadcast, again, live show on both LinkedIn and Twitch. Get those questions in the chat. We'll be watching, and we'll try to get those answered on stream.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, so we've jumped in. Let's jump right in. So we started on this journey in good Amazon style by really kind of listening to customers. And frankly, we spent a lot of time also talking to internal Amazon users because they face a lot of issues in their day-to-day when it comes to productivity. Like we're a fast, agile company moving quickly, and we want to understand kind of the pain points that those folks had and see what sort of tools that we could bring to bear to improve their team productivity. And there were kind of three things that really jumped out in terms of kind of team dynamics today. One is that business needs are continuously evolving. Like how a team operates this week, actually in 4 weeks from now, they're onto new projects, their needs have evolved, their needs have changed. And frankly, the existing tool sets that teams are using just isn't keeping up with that ever-changing landscape. And the reality of that is that teams have then been trying to use either kind of off-the-shelf software as tooling to help them, be it custom project management software, event management tools, task tracking tools, and collectively, like they're all great, but they're not perfect. And the real problem is that then that creates a need where these business teams then turn around to their technical teams and say, hey, I need some help. And unfortunately, that just creates such a problem and backlog in IT. It's like, I'd love to build you that tool. I just simply don't have the time, the budget, the money, the manpower, the people to make that happen. And so business teams are really left kind of standing and not being as productive as they could be. And so it's really based on that we set out on this vision of bringing Honeycode to market. And it was all about how do we empower those business users to essentially build their own apps, their own tools to really solve their team's productivity challenges. And we didn't want to stray too far from this idea of like, it's business users. This isn't really about empowering folks who are already really great technical folks who can use the full power of things like AWS, right? This is about, I'm a program manager. I sit in a business. Maybe I'm managing a project. Maybe I'm managing, I'm a marketer and I'm managing a video production shoot. And I've got all these files I want to move around. There's stakeholders working on projects. How do I keep track of that stuff? And like how I do it as a team is very different from how another team in another company does that. And so how do I build the right sort of tools to enable those sorts of people? And these kind of program managers, marketers, business analysts, they kind of have four key traits they really care about. One, they really want to be able to stay in the loop of what's going on. Two, we know that people are more and more mobile. And so they want the ability to get access to data that's live updated on their mobile devices. And that's a challenge there. A lot of the tools are great, maybe on the Mac or the PC, but they don't work great on the mobile device. And customers have become so familiar with the great experience of apps on mobile devices. But when it comes to kind of team business tools, they've been left a little wanting. At the same time, they want to personalize that experience. As I said, teams' needs are rather unique. And then there is way too much manual process in businesses. And so any ways that we can help teams and automate and improve those processes just gives time back to people and individuals to focus on more high value items. And so those were kind of core 4 capabilities that we wanted to bring to the product. And that's where we came out with the capabilities of Honeycode. And so kind of pivoting back to this idea of a business user who's familiar with a certain set of tools today, we wanted to go where and enable them with the skills that they have. And so number one of that is that we wanted to go with their skills of spreadsheets. Spreadsheets are very ubiquitous in business. And we wanted to leverage the skills that people have in that space to use them to manage the data that they have. And so with that, inside of Honeycode, we have kind of 4 key capabilities to enable people to build apps. One, we have tables. They act like spreadsheets, they are like spreadsheets, but they're actually a lot more than spreadsheets because we've brought new innovations there to enable them to actually operate like a database in a live, updating, and performant way. And so we can do things like joining data together that you could do in a database, but using the visual user interface of a spreadsheet. We've invested in building a new app builder that really is a new visual editor that enables business users to build the user interface of apps and how they want to use apps in their business environment. And it's the combination of building the user interface in the app builder and connecting it to data in a spreadsheet that really powers the magic of Honeycode. Thirdly, we've got an automation capability that is all about how can I build simple to build or automations that match the processes that I want to build for my apps, that match my business processes. And then finally, we wrap that all around this concept of teams. In the way that people are operating in organizations is the boundaries of what a team is continuously evolving. It's not as rigid as it perhaps once was. Like as I sit in, let's say I go back to my example of working on a video production shoot, like who I work with could span across multiple organizations. And so what my definition of a team is there changes, and it changes depending on the project that I'm on. And so we use this idea of teams to say, hey, I as a user can be part of multiple teams. And there's probably going to therefore be a set of data and apps that are associated to those teams that I want to collaborate with people inside of those teams. And so we use that core concept of teams as the really kind of grounding starting point to get started with Honeycode. But that's probably enough of me talking to slides and getting stuck into this. So why don't we jump in and see what this thing actually looks like?
Yeah, I think this is what everyone's been waiting to see. I mean, I know I have, right? Because it's one thing to tell me that, like, hey, we've created an experience that makes something easy for you. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll believe it when I see it, right? Like, I'm great that we've pitched that, but there were some screenshots in the Jeff Barr blog post. What are you going to be able to show us today, Gavin?
Well, I'm going to try and show you a soup to nuts end-to-end experience of building an app. And I'm going to show you how that happens inside of a team that I sit in. And actually, Nick and Rob are in the team with me. I've already invited them. And we're going to go through this process of building an app. And I'm going to show you really how simple it is. I'm going to show you a number of ways to do the same thing. But I'm not going to cover this up with wizards and some of the actually features in the product that make it even easier. I'm going to show you this in its raw form, like building it component by component, just so you get a sense of what it takes to build apps.
Awesome.
And just for everybody who's watching, this is launched. If you sign up for Honeycode today, you can do everything that we're doing. Is that right, Gavin?
That's right. I am using an account. I'm not using my Amazon account. I'm using an account that I signed up on the public service. We launched this week. So everybody can go to honeycode.aws and sign up for an account and get started.
Yeah, so this is not vaporware. Just I feel like that needs to be repeated because I think what you're going to show us is going to be very compelling, and people are going to naturally wonder, well, hold on, what is the smoke and mirrors? And if I understand you correctly, you're saying there are no smoke and mirrors. This is how easy it is.
Yeah, this is completely live. This is the real service, and so you're going to see my terrible typing. You're going to see me go, hang on, where did I move that button to? Yeah, you're going to see this for real.
Okay, I can't wait.
Alrighty, why don't we jump in here? So once folks have signed up for an account, they're going to land in part of the product called the home drive or the My Drive. And so here I've logged into the service. I've got a few items listed here. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of kind of just some of the landscapes so people are grounded in kind of some of the components that are going on here. So one of the core ideas of Honeycode here is that we have teams. And so teams are actually listed down the left-hand side here. So I can hop over to the team and I can show my team here. So everybody who signs up for Honeycode is created their own team. Okay, and in this particular team is myself, and I've actually added Nick and Rob to my team. And you can see here, everybody who signs up gets a free account with the ability to add 20 users. Okay, where we have caps and where there are additional offers that are above that, if you want more than 20 users, you can add additional users. And if you need more data inside of your workbooks, and I'm going to explain what a workbook is in a minute, but this is the homepage where you can control that. And if you're part of multiple teams, you're going to be able to see that in this listing here.
Gavin, we've got one request. Would you mind bumping up the font size in your browser 1? Perfect. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So back to the home drive here. So we've got this idea of a team, and I'm showing all of the workbooks and apps of my team. Well, what's a workbook? What's an app? How does this all hang together? So a workbook really is, think of it as the single unit that combines all of the data, all of the apps, and all of the automations for a particular project. So I'm going to show you today just building a very simple task to-do list type of experience, okay? And so I've actually got 3 workbooks listed here. I have already got a to-do workbook. I've got a PO approvals workbook and a workbook called Am I on a Call? And below a couple of them, I have a few apps. And so you can have multiple apps per workbook, actually as many as you want. And it's important then that you got this idea that you create this distinction that you could share apps with different people, even though they're inside of the same workbook that has the same data. And we'll come back to a little bit of how security and users and apps and all that stuff works later once you get a sense of this, but I just wanted to ground you in some of this here. So how do I get started, right? Let's jump right in. So I can create workbooks in a couple of ways. I can click the Create Workbook button. I can start from scratch. I can import a CSV file. So if you've got data existing in a spreadsheet, I can drop it in. Obviously, if I start from scratch, I can copy and paste data in as well. Or I can also use a template. And so there's a collection here. We're going to grow this list. This is just the starting. This is the first week out. We're going to add more templates to the service. And one of the workbooks that I've already got came from one of the templates here, that PO approval. But I've actually created a workbook. So I'm going to jump in. And I did a little bit of editing just to speed things up today. But I'm going to hop straight into this particular workbook. So when I first log in, I see here the sheet view. And so I see tables of data. There's nothing in here. I just created a couple of column headers. So we have task, status, and owner. And I'm going to build a to-do list today. On the left nav here, I have a menu. If I click, I can see the tables that are in my workbook. I have 2 tables, status and task. I have no apps yet, and I have no automation. Okay, so the first thing generally you do is you build out a little bit of your data model, okay? And so I'm going to start off with by actually just putting a little task list in Honeycode here. This is where you get to see some of my typing. I'm going to copy and paste some data in just real quick. And so I've added some very rudimentary, simple tasks, nothing too fun. Run, read a white paper, cook some dinner, iron some clothes, you name it, making it up as we go, right? And what's typical in this type of use case is you've got a bunch of items. I want to see maybe some status against them and maybe who's on task to do this, right? Now with Honeycode, I can start to build some of this connectivity between the data. What I did already build was just another little table that is 1 column, 4 items, a status table with red, yellow, green. You can see how this might apply to a business sense. And what I can do is if I go back to my task tables, I can now start to connect tables together. So if I select the status column, I go to format, I can choose this thing called a row link, which gives me the ability to connect tables together. I say, hey, my source is a table, and I'm going to point it to the status table. I click apply. Hey, presto. And very quickly, I can now see that those items are coming from the other table, their status. And I'm just going to fill a few out of these. And I don't have to just drag. I can copy. I can also fill down. So there's some familiarity here with how a spreadsheet operates. Well, that's kind of interesting. It's not groundbreaking yet, but you just wait. So the third column I've got here is I have this idea of an owner table. One of the things we've done is we've actually connected the idea of team to the data model. And so you can have a new contact type here of a person. We call it a contact. And so I can, again, go to the format menu and I can choose contact type. I'm going to leave the default. And I can actually start to pick people against here. And guess what? I'm seeing the people now that are in my particular team. And again, I can drag down. I'm going to add Rob to the bottom. So we've got a few folks here that are part of this, part of my little project here. Like, okay, so I've got a reasonable data model. It's pretty straightforward. It's not rocket science. Okay, well, now we've got some data. Why don't we build an app? And I can do this in a couple of ways. I come over to the apps menu and I can click plus, and I can do two things. I can use App Wizard, and literally in like 45 seconds to a couple of minutes, it's going to make a few guesses, ask you a few questions, and build an app. But that's just too easy. So I'm going to build the app manually myself. So I'm going to choose build my own, and it takes us into the app builder experience. Okay, and let me orient you a little bit to the user layout here. On the left-hand side, we have the screens of my app. So by default, when we create a new app, there's one screen, and I can add more screens. In the middle, I have the screen layout interface where I can choose to place certain items on the screen. I can edit text, etc., etc. And on the right, I have a properties pane where I can configure certain things of those particular options. I also, down the bottom, it's a little hidden until we get to that phase, there is also this thing called what we call the peeking sheet, which gives you a little snapshot back to the data that you're going to be connecting to from inside of your app design. But we'll come to that in a second. Okay, so very, very simply, I'm just going to go build this manually. I've got some options that I can add to my page. I'm going to start out very simply by just adding just a blank list control. Okay, and so I drop a list. I'm going to close this. I can pick this up. So I've got a list. I'm now going to set it to a particular table in my database. So what we're essentially doing is we've got a control on the screen that we're now going to say, please go connect this to data in my table. So I need to go pick the table, right? And so I want to go pick the tasks table. Okay. And as you can see here, down at the bottom, we're now seeing the task table that we created earlier. It should look familiar. And I can now very simply go and add data to my particular app. Okay, so I've done some things. And you can see there it's updated. It's pretty rough right now. Let's go change this. Let's call this task list. Okay, you're like, well, that's kind of nice. Why don't we actually go have a look here at what this thing looks like? Fun part is I can go click View App. Okay, and hey presto, we have two apps that have been built in parallel here. I have a web app, which I'm showing you a quick preview of, and it starts to look very familiar. It's not very pretty right now. We're going to go fix that. But I've also actually built a mobile app all at the same time. So if I come back to the builder here, there's a couple of options that are linked by default. I was building in a mobile app stream view, but we've also been building this in a web app view as well. So they're built automatically at the same time. You can disconnect them so they can look different if you want to, but by default, we help you out and make them then look the same. The fun part is I want to show you kind of how live and updating this is. So I'm going to put these two views side by side. All right, build this out. I'm going to put it in mobile, give me a bit more space. Okay, so right now my task list isn't particularly great. Let's do a little bit of layout work. Let's drag this up here. I'm just going to move this over here a little bit. Okay. All right, and you're starting to see, as you'll see on the right-hand side there, my app is actually updating in real time, okay? And so here's the fun part. Why don't we, let me show you how you share apps here. Okay, so I built an app. It's kind of rudimentary at the moment, but I'm actually now going to go share this app with a few colleagues on my team. So we had Nick, oops, and Rob. All right. We've updated. And so the fun part is I've now shared this app with Rob and Nick, but they don't have actually access to the workbook. They only have access to the app in question. And so if Nick or Rob would go log in either on their web browser or on their mobile device, they'd actually now be able to see this app in real time. I don't know, Nick, if you maybe want to show folks what that maybe looks like.
Yeah, so I've got, my iPhone right here, and to give you all slightly better view of this here, I've installed from the App Store, again, iPhone, Apple, the App Store, open up Honeycode, and so what I can see here on my home screen is any of the apps that I have associated with it. So as this loads, I can probably see under notifications, App 1, a minute ago, Gavin has shared an app with me. All right, so I can open that up. And then I can see right here I have my app list open, and it looks very similar to what you have over there in the browser on the mobile view. Or actually, no, the mobile view is from before, right?
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, I'm able to see it on mine as well.
All right, there you go. So we got app share, and I just want to clarify one thing. So the way that apps are shared, web apps, they just have a URL, right? But these apps are pushed out to this mobile app that you download from the iOS and Android stores, right? So you download this one-time app called the Honeycode app from iOS App Store or the Android store, and as soon as Honeycode apps are shared with you, it'll appear in that app view. And so that's how Nick and Rob are seeing that on their device straight away. The fun part is, I think as Nick is still showing the app stream there, as I make updates to the app builder, those changes are rolled out to everybody who's got this app already. So for instance, if I go back and go, I actually want to show who the owner is, I can drop that into my app design here. You're seeing my web app update. And then hopefully in real time there, you're seeing on the mobile device in a completely different location to me, Nick's mobile device is also updated.
Okay, wait, we have to rewind that. You just dragged a row, the owner row, or the owner column rather, into the designer on the left here. And we saw it instantly appear in both the web app and the mobile app. Is that right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's almost instant, but you can see there's some performance, right? So we use this idea of live updating, not just to do app design, but we use this idea of updating of live updating to do the two-way communication in app. So for instance, right now this app is very rudimentary. It just shows a list. But if I go in here and actually set the properties of this middle column and just make it editable.
1 second, sorry, we're rebooting the camera, Gavin, on the overhead. Yeah. Gonna go back to the other screen for one moment. Sorry, continue. I was interrupting you.
That's okay. That's okay. I was gonna wait. So, so what I've just done in one click is I've made this status column editable. Okay, and you can see over here now in the web app, I can now pick those items, and this is where that power comes from. That status table is now driving a drop down in the app UI. The fun part is if I hands off the keyboard here, if one of you guys now go change one of those items, because you can, because it's now editable.
All right, I'll try that. So I'm going to go to iron close. It's set to green. I'm going to change that over to red.
And there you go. So I'm now seeing my updates to red. You're also seeing down here in the data that it's actually updated the spreadsheet. And that's how this power of apps and live updating works. But we're not done. We're not even close to done. There's way more in here.
Right? Okay, we're gonna have to get some more. But can we? So to my understanding, Gavin, you just showed us that we basically have our data as a golden source of truth that is live updating as we edit our UI and auto deploying those updates to all people that are shared with that application. All of that essentially happens seamlessly in one step.
Yep. And I didn't have to deploy any infrastructure. I didn't have to write any code. I literally created an app in the web browser right there.
So I feel like we need to really spend just a couple more minutes admiring what we've accomplished here, because while what you're showing us is a fairly simple CRUD app, right? I mean, most of us have built a to-do app if you're a software developer. But if you're not a software developer, you kind of have to rely on a software developer to build one of these. And if you work in a large company, then you've been through this process, right? This is kind of talking about what Gavin mentioned early on, where if you're a business user, you know, if you rely on IT for these kinds of things, you may be familiar with the process of even if the IT department is staffed properly to build a mobile app, then you're talking about installing enterprise certificates, sideloading the application. You request a feature like, can I edit the status of a to-do list? And that's like a several week work item. And that's just to get the work done. Who knows how long it's going to take to push that out to the internal enterprise app distribution system, right? And what you're showing us right here just cuts through all of that.
I think another thing, like, even as someone who writes code, I see this as an opportunity to automate a lot of things that I'm still doing manually myself. You know, like, just because I could write an application that is, you know, push my stuff from an Excel sheet into a database, I don't want to be necessarily doing that. It may not be worth the time cost to me. Something like this could be way more appealing. Like I can't even begin to enumerate the number of times that like documents are passed around and then stored in a central place, and then people update them and all of this. And it's like this is exactly what solves that problem.
Yeah, and also, I mean, just the light bulbs are going off, right? I could imagine, if we're on a virtual team, I'm out in the field, I'm working with a customer, there's some piece of missing data, I can just ping you and say, hey, Gavin, can we add the product number column to the inventory? And then can you show me how many units are in stock, right? Customer XYZ needs this right now. This is, I mean, this is just not possible with a lot of the legacy ways in which we did kind of proprietary app, built proprietary apps for enterprise solutions. So, I mean, wow.
Fantastic.
I was worrying that I was writing checks that you would have to cash, Gavin, but now it's at your own hand. You said there's more. We want to see it. I know there's light bulbs. There's also some questions. You talked a little bit before about authentication. I know that you sent me by adding my email. You added me to this application. As soon as I start thinking about data in that workbook or in that that spreadsheet that you have over there, I'm trying to think like, okay, well, how am I going to access tier that permissioning, all of these things. And even beyond all of that, it's great to have this live updating spreadsheet that we have here, or this app that was delivered to me. But I'm sure you have some more bells and whistles for sort of delivering last mile things like notifications and beyond.
That's right. Yeah, let's definitely talk about two key next areas. One, let's talk about automations, and let's talk a little bit about the security and app sharing of model that exists inside of Honeycode. Let's talk about automations first and how you could automate this. So let's use this use case and continue that. So if I come back to the left-hand side here, and I'm going to make this a bit bigger just so you can see everything. What's pretty common is in a very simple CRUD app, task app in this particular case, what happens if I want to get notified if, say, Nick changes the status of one of these items? So why don't we just add that? So I can come across here, I can click an automation, and automations really follow a very simple paradigm of some sort of trigger event and then some sort of action based on that trigger event. Pretty straightforward as a concept to understand. By default, we have 4 triggers. 1, if a date or time is reached, if a row is added or deleted to a table, which is kind of useful, like if someone's maybe using a form to submit data in their app and adds a row of data to a table, you could kick off an automation based on that. If a column changes, so if any value in a column of data changes, you can pick out the row that changed, or if a particular cell changes. So in our particular case, right, I want to know, let's say, if Nick's slipping behind on his ironing and he's gone back to like, oh, it's not happening. I got to set my status to red, right? So I'm going to choose column, and I'm going to pick a table. I'm going to pick the tasks table, and then I'm going to pick a column. In this particular case, I'm going to pick status, right? So we have this reference of square brackets for column titles across the workbook. I'm going to leave everything else default. And in this particular case, I've got then some options. So a trigger condition is set. I'm going to create some actions based on that. And I can do a bunch of different things. I can do a notify, which is both an email or a mobile push notification, because that's the fun part right now. We have an app on the mobile device, so I can do posts on the mobile device. I can do in data tasks, like add a row to a table. I can delete a row from the table. So you can start to build some pretty interesting automatic processes, like add a row to this table, make a change in this other table, and then delete the source row that was in the original table that kicked this automation off. You can create those kind of flows. I have some variations on that, so I can do an overwrite, or I can do the variation again of like, if the row already exists, update it. If it doesn't exist, add another row to the table, right? And so you can start to build some pretty interesting logic with some of those options. Right now, I'm just going to do a simple notify, right? So I get the view that comes up is an email. So I can actually pull the recipient for this from the table, or I could hard code it. And so I literally can go, I'm going to pick the owner, and I'm actually going to add an email address here too. So get my email address there. Oh, I'm in a different workbook here. Okay, so I'm going to get myself. We'll come back. We'll do this in a sec. This status has change to equals, and I'm going to pick the status for the task. And we're going to type this for task. Okay, and you can start to see there it's starting to pull out this particular information, right? And I can add more and more. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good with this. I can add a link to the app if I want, and now I click publish. Okay, and give it a few seconds for the automation to be public. Okay, that's all ready to go. And so now, if any time that Nick or Rob go update a status, we're actually going to see an email come through or a push notification to me on the device here. And it'll take a few minutes for that to come through. We have to wait for emails to flow, but it's as simple as that, as creating automations in the product. Now, though the automations I just showed you there are actually just automations inside of really the data. I can also build automations inside of apps. And so I want to show you that real quick. So a pretty common scenario here is, let's say, if I build a new screen and maybe I've got some sort of form on here. So I've got a block and then maybe I've got another block and I add a button. It's a pretty common scenario, right? And maybe I'm passing data in. I can actually set properties on a button in a very similar way to the automations capability. And I'm diving a lot deeper now, so bear with me here for a second. I can come across to the actions, and not only can I do simple things like make a button navigate to another screen or refresh the current screen, I can actually create automations inside of here. And you'll see here is that there's actually a condensed version of that same automations flow. So when I click the button, I can do a bunch of things like do a notify, add a row of data. And so a pretty common thing is, let's say if I'm building a web form and I've got choices, right? I can either use the live updating mechanism where I've got some input fields and as soon as I edit text, it updates the sheet, or I can actually disconnect the app from the data service. I can have a bunch of input forms, and then when I click the button, we can validate that everything is filled in correctly before submitting it to the table. So I can disconnect the live updating in that sort of manner. So there's lots of different ways to control how data gets updated, but they're probably things for us to dig into in deeper later sessions. But I just wanted to show you that there is more here under the covers when it comes to automations and controlling data flow between screens. Okay, so we talked a little bit about automations. Maybe we should talk a little bit about how kind of sharing works inside of apps and data. So let's go back to the home screen here and let me show you some of the user interface here. So we've been building this top workbook here called To Do, and the app that I built is called App 1. That's the name of the app that appeared for Nick and Rob, and I can rename it. So I can very easily rename this app to be something more appropriately friendly inside of the app builder. What I want to show you though is I have two choices, right? Nick and Rob, as part of my team, can collectively now build workbooks in my team. Okay, I'm currently the admin of this team, but they can go create new workbooks and new apps inside of this. But I won't see them unless they share them in that particular sense, or if other people are added. But if I want to control who specifically has access to an app or a workbook, I can share them specifically. So if I shared right now, the app is just shared with Nick, Rob, and myself. Okay, and we see that in this particular screen here. I can also choose to share the workbook. So right now, only Gavin can see the workbook. So Nick and Rob can't go in and change the app. They can't change the data without using the interface of the app. They can't change the app layout of the app. All they can do is they're an app user and use the app in the way that me as a builder have configured it, okay? And so that's really the first level of data security here, is I can control who has workbook access, who has app access, and then there's a third layer that I'm going to show you now, which is about access to data at a row level in tables. And this is some of the fun part. Okay, so let's go back to the app builder for a second. I'm going to go into the workbook here. And I'm going to show you. So earlier, right, we had this very nice simple app. We have a bunch of items. We have different people associated to them, okay? And a pretty common scenario is, if I got the task list here, is like, I actually only want to show Nick the tasks that he's got to do, and he doesn't need to be distracted by everything that Gavin and Rob have to do, right? In one click, let me show you how we turn on a feature called personalization. So I can come back to the list. I'm going to go to properties. It's a bit small here. And I'm going to on the bottom here, we've got this item called Personalization. If you remember right back at the beginning, I enabled a column of data called owner, and I changed it to a contact type. Because it's a contact type, I can now use that context of the user and compare it to the user that's logged into the app. So in my app in the web browser here, I'm logged in as Gavin. On Nick's phone, he's logged into the Honeycode as Nick, as is Rob, right? And you can use that context to compare it to the contact values out of a column. This is easier if I just show you what it looks like. So I can literally go into personalization here. I can pick the owner column, and you'll see what happens. My app has been updated, and it just shows Gavin. If Nick and Rob go into their versions of the app, they'll see, and I think on one of the cameras you'll see here, I think it's Nick's, you'll see now I think it's 3 rows of data in his app, right? Yep. And so here we've suddenly got one app connected to a single data table that's now showing a different user interface for 3 different people.
That's rad.
On that for a second.
Yeah, no, perfect. Yeah, that's wow. That's really cool. I just think like every single time I hear about another feature that's supported, like watching it work without like a slow redeploy or like I need to update my app from the App Store. Like every single time there's another one of these more complicated or more complex features that you show me, and then I see it happen in front of me. I'm just wowed every time. Like it doesn't get old.
And not only that, I mean, I have to appreciate this from the perspective of, while there are ways to do things like over-the-air updates for apps, this is even faster than, say, a React Native app over-the-air, because we're not doing a bundle reload. This seems to be doing it without any sort of reload, and it's all push-based. So, I mean, at the technical level, this is incredibly impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology happening under the covers to make it look this simple. Say that.
we can get into a little bit of some of that in a bit. Was there anything else in particular you wanted to show off? I mean, we literally 10-15 minutes ago started from scratch from a blank notebook or blank workbook. You created a new one, simple to do app. We walked through creating the spreadsheet that would house all of our data for our application, and then from there you entered the editor, you created the interface. We saw that it simultaneously built mobile and web interfaces at the same time. You showed us the hot reloading between the editor and your other in browser. We showed that reloading instantaneously on my phone. I know Rob said it worked on his as well. What else? We set up actions. So you showed us if we change things, it will send an email. I know I changed some things. I saw Rob changing some on my phone as well. So you'll probably get a bunch of emails now with those notifications. And then lastly, you just saw in 1 or 2 clicks the personalization feature, which is essentially tiered permissioning for access to data within an application with like 1 or 2 clicks. That was like, I'm speechless. Like that's crazy.
Yeah. We do have 2 really interesting questions that I wanted to forward to you, Gavin. I think they're really good discussion points, especially for those on Twitch who can't see these questions here. One of them has to do with the data, right? So you showed us how you lock down the permissions so that we can only edit the tasks that are assigned to us. But let's say before you did that, you left the app open temporarily. We were still kind of hacking on it. We didn't know quite how it should look or feel or what the restrictions should be. And during that time, I accidentally went in there and deleted a row. Is there a way to roll the notebook back and recover that data?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we are taking snapshots as changes are made to the workbooks. And so you can go back and recover the workbook at an earlier state, right from within inside of the user interface here. You have to be careful though, right? Because as your apps get more complicated, you might think, oh, I just made this little mistake, let me roll the workbook app. But if your app is out there in the wild and there's lots of people making changes, that might be destructive to some other changes that other people have made. So you want to be a little cautious. There are other ways though that you could achieve a similar sort of thing. Like natively right now, we don't have full auditing capability. Like if any changes happened everywhere that surfaced to the user, we have it on the back end, but it's not visible yet from an end user builder standpoint. But because it's a platform that you can build on, I can actually build that stuff myself, right? I have tables of data. I could set up automations that say, anytime anything in this column changes, including adding a row or delete a column, write that row of data to another table. And so I have a record that it's actually occurred. And so I can actually build my own auditing capabilities inside of my own app if I want to.
Yeah.
And so there are things that you can do here to mitigate some of those problems.
That is very interesting.
Yeah.
A related question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say it's a really interesting capability because I think one of the things that people often goes through their mind when they look and observe applications or services like this is that, you know, it's a set of abstractions on top of capabilities that I want to perform, and oftentimes the question becomes, well, what is going to be the blocker for me where I want to do something that it doesn't support? And so I was not in any way expecting the answer to be, oh, we don't formally support auditing first party. Well, the tools are actually so generalizable that you can build that functionality yourself. And so it's really amazing that this concept that may not, you know, may be very standard for people that are database admins and operators there, to bring that capability to actually have that confidence that you can run production data out of a Honeycode app without even writing any code, because you can build in those features. Like that was actually very surprising to me. That's really cool stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of databases,
cool.
another question we have over here is, can we use external data sources? So you showed us, it looks like we can import data from a CSV file. We can author the data from scratch. But if I have my data sitting elsewhere, is there like a connector or something that I can use to hook them up?
Yeah, great question. This is without doubt the number one request we have. There's no doubt. Like, we knew about this coming into launching the beta version of this, and we know it's hot topic everywhere. Right now, as you say, we have an API. It's not as complete as we would like it, but you can do some certain things. I even saw within like the first few hours of the service launching, someone had built a little bit of integration using the API to an S3 bucket and some other things. So there is some capability there today, but it's important. It's not really designed for this business user in mind. Like, as soon as you have to step out and code against an API, we've now transitioned back to a more technical user. Our goal is to make that ability to connect to external data a feature of the service, but enabled as a feature of the service for a business user. And so we do expect to bring capabilities like connectors to Honeycode and to enable those experiences, both frankly for AWS services, so data that's stored in AWS services, but there's a whole wide world out of there, and customers are already asking us for, well, can I connect to this data or this product that's outside of the AWS family? It's something for our roadmap. We're going to get to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that the context is really valuable there. I think that you know, everyone always wishes they knew the roadmap of every single tool, and I think one of the more valuable things into understanding is how the team's thinking, how they're prioritizing things, how they would craft their roadmap. And so the additional context around being laser focused on a particular set of business users here helps to sort of contextualize for people, like, well, when will this feature come in, or when will this integration for maybe my AWS account come in? And the answer is, you know, and I don't know if we mentioned it sort of tangentially, but Honeycode lives outside of an AWS account, right? Like, it's in its own entire sign-up process. It's billed separately. It has its own unique billing sort of schema, which we'll get into in a moment. But this is, again, not necessarily for the AWS user looking to have a front end that just fronts S3 and Dynamo and their existing resources. This is something wholly separate.
It is. And yeah, it's worth talking a little bit about kind of that sign up flow and how it connects to AWS. So look, our number one goal here is that there are, 1 billion, 2 billion, somewhere like that, like business users out there, right? They know how to use spreadsheets. They are struggling with these types of problems in their day-to-day, and they're the type of people that we want to empower with Honeycode. They're our primary audience. That being said, like, the initial engagement from customers, especially a lot of the AWS community, has been fantastic. And we are absolutely going to listen to the requirements that also come from that community. And so we could see Honeycode also evolve to being able to support multiple audiences, right? Like, business users is number one. But what happens in the future is maybe I want to build a different app that maybe lets me control, maybe it's a new control plane for the AWS services in the console. Why couldn't I do that in a Honeycode app? Like, there's all sorts of ideas we could kick around. Like, it is just APIs at the end of the day, right? So once we've got the fabric in place to enable those new scenarios, like, it's up to the imagination and the creativity of our community. And that's actually a good segue to one of the other things that I want to talk about. Is another area that we've invested in this product is we wanted to bring the community along with us on this journey. And so we've invested in a community platform, really fundamentally because the inspiration and the ideas out there and just the creativity is remarkable. And we wanted to help and foster that community from inside of the product. And so you can get access to the community from the product tier. So if I click over on the help icon, I can actually hop into the community tab. I'm going to make this a bit bigger. And you can see here, you land in the community experience where there's a whole bunch of training materials, getting started, tips and tricks, features. And then there's also a discussion area. So you can jump in here, and these are all posts that have been happening from customers since we launched the service this week, and it's fantastic to see this level of engagement. So if there are additional questions, like people are trying to figure out how to go, check out some of the materials here, ask questions in the community. Our team is staffed, they're engaging to engage with folks on here, but we'd also love to see like fellow honeycoders helping each other, right? That's a wonderful thing when that happens.
Yeah, I love that. One of the items in the forum was that users show eternally as invited. Eternally seems forever and ever. It will never be otherwise. But this is great. I mean, I think this is the exact kind of thing that you look for when you're talking about a new product to make sure that you're getting that traction. I mean, the fact that you're getting this kind of engagement this shortly after launch is really encouraging to me.
Yeah, and look, at the end of the day, right now, in a rudimentary way, the list of questions that are coming in from our customers here and their asks and their feedback, that is driving our roadmap, right? And so, like, we're customer obsessed. Like, we're part of Amazon and AWS, and it's really great to see the ideas and the feedback coming in, and it's already shaping kind of how the team's thinking about where we go from here.
Wait, Gavin, I have a question for you. If I have a product roadmap suggestion, should I post it on Twitter or on your community forum?
I'd love for you to post it in the community forum.
Okay.
That's going to be a more concrete way for us to capture it and add it to our roadmap.
I'll be sure to spread the news. Thanks. Yeah, just wanted to make sure. So next up, I brought up pricing before, the uniqueness of this living in a standalone account that is not tied to any AWS otherwise parent account. So what is the pricing looking like for an application like this?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm actually going to go to the Honeycode website here because it's going to do a better job of explaining it. And I'll talk you through kind of what I'm looking at here. So if folks go to honeycode.aws, this is the front end website where you can sign up to be a Honeycode user. And let's talk a little bit about pricing. So at launch, we have 3 pricing tiers. And like it's been a big question for us, frankly, of kind of how customers are going to use the service. Like, how much data do they need? How many workbooks they're going to have? What's going to be the interesting kind of ways that customers use it? And so we've gone out with kind of 3 levels of pricing at our launch here. So as I said right at the beginning, like, you sign up for Honeycode, you get everything that I've just shown you right now, the apps that I built, everything is free and enabled in the basic tier. Like, all of that stuff is there. Like, the caps that we have are up to 20 users and 2,500 rows of data per workbook. Okay, and I want to explain this a little bit carefully, okay? Because this may not be obvious. So users is relatively straightforward. Like, if you want to add the 21st user to your team, you need to upgrade to the Plus or the Pro tier, okay? By default, in the basic plan, you can create an unlimited, basically an almost unlimited number of workbooks. I have to be careful using the word unlimited in the world. And essentially, though, that they are capped at 2,500 rows of data each, okay, in the basic tier. There are an awful lot of use cases, though, that you can build within 2,500 rows of data, right? That's a very big task list of when you have 2,500 rows, right? Now, if you want to go beyond that, and you want more rows of data per workbook, you can upgrade to the Plus or Pro tier. So the Plus tier has 10,000 rows per workbook, and you can have many workbooks in your team, or Pro has 100,000. We're looking at what makes sense beyond that. Like, there are going to be cases where customers say, well, I've got more than 100,000 rows of data. How do I use this? How does this make sense? And so we've designed the database technology underneath to scale. The question is it good to put it in a workbook? Maybe we want a closely coupled relationship with some of the other AWS services where we can store huge amounts of data. Is that the better model? The point is that we need the data in tables to get some of that live updating capability. And so it's a decision we want to make as we see customer feedback, like which way to go. Is it that we increase above 100,000 rows in a workbook? Maybe we create workbook to workbook federation. Maybe we create connectors to other AWS services and other databases. These are all questions that we want to understand from our community of customers. But right now, there's a lot of value that you're getting in these tiers. So as you want more users and more rows per workbook, you need to upgrade to some of these later tiers. And the way that we do that is when you sign up for the basic tier as a new user, you all have to sign up at the basic tier, is that you're just signing up with an email. Okay, there's no AWS account creation at that point. And so you very simply email password, sign up for an account, and hey presto, you're off in the experience that I just showed you. When you want to upgrade to the Plus and Pro tier, what actually happens under the covers is that we connect your Honeycode team to an AWS account, and it's the AWS account that then gets built. Okay, and so the flow, once you do the upgrade to Pro and Plus, is that you'll create an AWS account at that point if you don't have one, and then associate your Honeycode team to it, okay? Because then billing's done against the AWS account. We didn't want to build all that infrastructure right now. Again, it's something that we're going to look at. Are there other simpler ways that we can enable other billing services or other Amazon assets to do some of this? But it's TBD. But that's the upgrade path today.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, very comprehensive answer there. And again, 2,500 rows. I think when I think about the business tasks that I've solved, like, yeah, we're talking this database level stuff where the size of the data set grows exorbitantly, but I can't remember the last time I used a spreadsheet in front of me that was more than 2,500 rows, maybe years ago. I could probably name on one hand, right? So I think that for the free tier is going to be a very compelling option for people to not only try out and get started, but maybe to adopt and start building applications on top of.
Yep. It's exciting. We're excited to see what people do.
All right, let's see. Wow, yeah, this is not the Honeycode show. This is just, a very big launch that very exciting for many reasons. We've been spending a lot of time on it. We talked about support on the forums. We talked about pricing. I guess one topic that comes to mind is like with access. We covered, personalization and granting access and limiting access. So let's say, I'm on your team, or I'm in your workbook. You've given me permission. Let's say you've even pared down for only the tasks that I have permission of. But let's say I leave to go join another company. I no longer should have access to this data. What does that revocation process look like? Do you just remove me from the team in there, and then all of the granular permissions downstream sort of update automatically?
Yeah, why don't I kick you out of my team?
All right, hold on one sec. Let me open the the phone and we'll show it live. Let's go. Okay, right there. Oh, one sec.
This may take a few minutes for the things to cascade through, so it may not be a great live demo here, but the point is I'm going to show you removing you from the team here, and then as soon as the authorization token expires, then you won't have access to anything as part of it.
Cool. I'll just leave it up while we talk through some of the final things then. Team member. Cool.
He's gone. Nick's gone from my team.
All right. It's only a matter of time before I find out.
Or one out for Nick, everyone.
So, you spoke a little bit about, the fact that, at the larger tiers, this does tie in with for billing system into the another AWS account. There's lots of tech that makes all this possible. We were surmising about some of the ways that some of the things that we hypothesized could be involved. Is there any of the tech under the hood that we really do want to surface, or like, anything there, or?
Yeah, why not? I mean, clearly there are some new innovations that have actually exist inside of Honeycode, right? They're not existing services. The service that's been built is Honeycode, but a lot of it is frankly running on AWS infrastructure. So we are a big consumer of S3. We're a big consumer of EC2. Most of the magic you're seeing is really down to three core services: S3, EC2, which is most of it, and then we also heavily use the IoT services. So all of that updating that's happening is using a lot of the AWS infrastructure there to do that live notification. But these essentially, as you load workbooks, open a workbook, open an app, we load it into memory. So this is an in-memory database that we've essentially built, and that's why the performance is so high.
That's awesome. That's something that I don't think most people would think about, like right off the cuff, right? Like an IoT service. But when you think about the workload profile here, real time, you want this synced, event stream driven sort of over-the-air deployments. That's really innovative use of those IoT services. That's cool.
Yeah, and just to clarify that too, when people hear IoT, normally they think of some sort of embedded device, or Raspberry Pi or Arduino or these IoT buttons. While those are certainly IoT devices, what we're seeing here is a really creative use of IoT, and you're not the only team to do this, but the IoT is very flexible in the sense that you can use it as a WebSocket gateway, right? It's just a completely managed WebSocket gateway for you. Where you can do these things like push notifications, so you can enable these kinds of real-time interactions. So really cool to hear that you're using AWS in such a creative way.
Yeah,
cool. I don't know, you couldn't see it, Gavin, but on my side here, we've got the no mobile apps now. So my access was revoked. I don't have access to it anymore. Behaving as intended. Awesome stuff. Well, I mean, we're probably at about an hour for this one session, and we have even more to get to, but Gavin, this was really great. Again, I saw the launch materials. I read all of the messaging. They said, you guys are going to make it easier for us to build applications, or for business users in particular to build applications. And I think this demo really sells me on that. And I hope that we can get this in front of the people so that even if they're not AWS users today, because again, this is not an AWS service, maybe they could be getting started to build some of their own apps. I think a lot of the interfaces are familiar. A lot of the user experiences are things that people are familiar with. And a lot of the improvements here are really just, I would call them last mile problems, but I think there's so much more than that, like going from a spreadsheet to, fully managed and permissions, real-time syncing database features is a big jump, in the same way that automating real-time data syncing with app editing and deployment, I don't know, that's far more than the last mile for a lot of folks. That's where they spend all their time in traditional application development. So some really cool stuff. Again, Gavin G, product management from the Honeycode team. Thank you so much for joining us today, Gavin.
My most pleasure. It's been super fun to share what we have, and we're excited to see what customers to do. There's more coming. And frankly, there's more that we could show you as well. So I'm also love to hear from customers and folks out there to say, hey, look, can you if you want more content on certain things, I'm happy to come back and demo more and show other things as well.
Awesome. So one final sign off for Honeycode here. If you're looking to get started, head on over to honeycode.aws, sign up for an account, username and password, and you can get started building apps just like we did today on today's show. Yeah, and it's free and it's generally available. Awesome. Well, we've got 2 more very exciting demos coming up. We are going to go to a quick break. I promise it'll be quick. Hang tight. We'll be right back. Thanks again, Gavin. We'll see everyone soon.
Thank you.